Hello, and welcome to episode 2 of Living Out Loud, which is a podcast by domestic abuse survivors for domestic abuse victim survivors and their support systems. I'm Ellen,
And I'm Dee Dee.
and we're so glad to be back with you. If anybody is watching again, or if anybody's watching for the first time, um, purpose of this is for support and information and sharing experiences and to let you know that you're not alone. And today's topic is physical abuse. Physical abuse is recognized as the most known or recognized form of abuse, and mostly because it can be seen. Um, I will say growing up back in the 70s and 80s when I was growing up, yes, I am that old. I thought that was the only type of abuse, right? I thought that was the only type. You didn't hear about or know about emotional or verbal or mental or financial or spiritual, which are all ones that we are going to get to. You didn't hear about those, right? You just heard about physical abuse. And I remember things like the movie The Burning Bed with Farrah Fawcett, and that was so huge when that came out. But I thought that was the only type. So that's what we're going to talk about today. But I did want to bring one thing up before we did that. We've gotten some feedback on this podcast, and a lot of it, of course, is from people that we shared it with. And one that I wanted to address, just because it kind of made me laugh, was my very good friend, Todd, expressed that I was too far away from the camera. And then I looked like a little tiny head floating in like a huge background. And I was like, well, I do have a little tiny head. I always have. I used to have to buy junior size sunglasses and hats because nothing fit me. And if I tried something adult, I looked like I was playing dress up. So, yes, I have a tiny head. So, in honor of Todd, I am closer to the camera. So, I'm right in your face. And I'm also supporting my laptop and propped it up with our yearbooks from high school. So, Todd, you're here in spirit. So physical abuse. There are a number of types, and I'm going to read them to you because I have them written down, and I took them from some websites that had, that are dedicated to abuse. So scratching, punching, biting, strangling, and kicking, throwing something at you, pulling your hair, grabbing your clothes, pushing or pulling you, grabbing you to prevent you from leaving or to force you to go somewhere. Those are taken from stopdomesticabuse.uk. And I thought this was interesting because it was a UK website in regard to domestic abuse. And then I have some info from an American website that included on top of those burning, damaging personal property, refusing medical care or controlling your partner's medications, which would also mean withholding your partner's medications, coercing a partner into substance abuse, and use of weapons. And those come from womenagainstabuse.org. Now, I'd like to say, and we've mentioned this before, it is called Women Against Abuse. We know that this can happen in any type of relationship. Okay. So man on woman, woman on man, man on man, woman on woman, the whole range. We know that these can happen in both. And so those are what are recognized as the types of physical abuse. Now, a lot of people think of physical abuse as just hitting. And I would also like to add to that list spitting, right? We have heard of a partner or spouse spitting on their spouse, which is probably one of the most degrading things that you can do to someone. In regard to these types, there's one that I just wanted to share um, a story about. So, in regards to throwing something at you, I was in a car with my ex-husband and we were going somewhere and I cannot remember where. I think we were going to like meet friends or something like that. We did not have our children with us. And I do believe at the time I only had two out of my three kids. So we're going back uh 17 years. Okay. And we were driving somewhere and we were fighting, and we fought a lot. We pretty much fought all the time. And on our way to wherever we were going, we went through a drive-through to stop and get food. And so we fought our way up to the order window, and then we fought our way up to the pickup window. And, he was driving, so he like took the order and got it in the car, and we drove away, still fighting. And he is, rooting around like in the bag, like with the food, and he's, taking food out and unwrapping it. And he threw it at my face. And considering we were in the front seat of a car, he didn't miss, right? And we were about a foot away from each other. And he said to me, if you ever divorce me, I will get the kids. I will take the kids. And I was stunned um, because it felt like we had reached a new level, shall we say. I was kind of like, what fresh hell is this? This is new. And so that at the time when it happened, um, I wasn't thinking it was abuse, right? I was thinking he was frustrated, got to the end of his rope, like, but you know what? To throw food at someone, again, it's along the lines of the spitting thing. It's meant to be degrading, right? It's meant to be, well, it's meant to exert some form of power or control over you. And don't forget, we were still on our way to go meet people. So I had to, get myself together. Um, so throwing something at you, it can be anything. It doesn't have to be food. It's probably one of the worst things you could throw at someone, but not as damaging as a heavy object. But that is that is something that stands out to me um, in my experience with my ex-husband.
Mhm.
So it falls under the list.
It
Second I
does.
saw it, second I saw it, I was like, oh, I remember that, right? Like that was a great night. So I just wanted to share that because we did talk about sharing our experiences because we do have them, which is what prompted us to start this podcast to begin with.
Thanks for sharing that, Ellen. I know that's so
You're
hard
welcome.
because it's something where it can be so triggering. You think back to a moment, you see something on the list, and as you and I have both discussed, even being out of our abusive relationships that we were in, there's so many triggers, for years to come. You see something on a list and it flashes back. And even you and I were having this conversation in preparation for this episode. And I wrote down 2 or 3 examples. I was a victim of domestic violence, and physical abuse I was a victim of that for 2 or 3 years. Well, looking back, even actually after this list is there, more than that. Now that you add all these, really give the full scope of what that's defined as. I can think about a time when I was dating somebody that was abusive, and I remember a very distinct moment early on, and had a spray bottle thrown at me, and they just laughed it off like it's no big deal, and we were cleaning or something, and that was there was some excuse that came along with it. Or the example I think about too is driving on a trip, and my abusive partner threw a book at me and in the car, and that was definitely a really scary moment. And as I obviously censor a lot of these stories, there's a lot that I can say, check, check, check. That happened to me, that happened to me, that happened to me. And it's something where with physical abuse, a lot of you probably will say, of course, that's the highest one because you can see it. But a lot of things happen where abusers know, don't hit you in the face, cover up your bruises. I had an experience also where my abusive partner told me to cover up my bruises and when we were going to a friend's house so nobody could see. And so there's a lot of tactic and thought to that, even though it is the biggest form of visual representation of abuse, if you will. There's definitely tactics behind it, and that can come up. And even in that same vein, you know, we have some statistics too that say, I'm just gonna read these off. Intimate partners kill 50% of women and 10% of male victims. So basically 50% of the
Homicides.
homicides, exactly,
Homicides.
are going exactly, and that's exactly what they are. And I was thinking about in preparation for this too, so many people are fascinated with like the true crime podcast or even like 2020, you know, seeing all those things that happen to people. And I think
I
that
am guilty of liking true
and
crime
I
podcasts.
think
Sorry, I am.
no, and I think there's a lot of awareness with them too, because it is
There
something
is.
where these things happen. You and I have a mutual friend who has a lot of facts in the law enforcement of situations that have
Yes.
happened based on their work in law enforcement. And so many times you may think it's just drama TV or something, but these are real things that happen to people, that people wind up as homicide victims because of abusive partners. But physical abuse, and as Ellen was saying, we'll go into the different types, because other types of abuse are not um, less than physical abuse. There's a spectrum of different types, but this is
Right.
what we're focusing on now. But a lot of times I think this statistics are underreported also because people think, well, he didn't hit me in the face, so is it abuse? You know, and that's actually like a quote that I have from um, a show that I've watched. I don't know if anybody's seen Made, but
I haven't, no.
on that Netflix series, you know, she goes to file a police report. She said, you know, he hit close to me. He didn't maybe hit me directly in the face, but he hit me right here. And so I think that there's so many different areas, and that's why we want to really help educate people.
And I just want to add to that before you continue with your stats that, and this comment was made to me by a police officer when I was filing a police report
Mhm.
not too long ago, 2022. And 2022, I had been divorced for 3 years at this point in time. So I had gone to the police with an incredibly harassing email from my ex-husband. That once my attorney that I retained printed it out, it was 20 pages long, front and back.
Mm.
And in the email, he said he was declaring nuclear war on me, right?
Wow.
And, and I had gone to the police for an order of protection, yet another one. And he said, well, he doesn't make, oh no, I'm sorry. His exact words were, he's smart enough not to make a direct threat of violence against you.
Police officer said this to you?
Yeah. And my friend who was with me at the time said to him, how is nuclear war not a direct threat? She's like, do you know what's left after a nuclear war? Nothing. Nothing's
Alliteration.
left.
Right.
And some people, and listen, don't assume abusers aren't smart. That is a mistake.
Mhm.
They know exactly how far to go and where to stop so that they can't be, they can't get in trouble.
Right.
They know
Total line.
exactly where to stop.
They told the line, you know, just
Yes, they know
under.
how far to go. They do. So
Mhm.
I just wanted to add that because that's important to remember that um, these people are not stupid,
Mhm.
um, not by any means. They're not, you see some depictions sometimes in the media or maybe movies in the past where, the abuser is some, drunk guy living in a trailer in the woods, and beating his wife. No, no, that it spans every socioeconomic,
Mhm.
um, everything,
Yes.
everything. So
Well,
don't think that it's just some, I don't want to make a
doesn't
comment that
discriminate.
don't think it's some ignoramus, it's not. These are educated people
Well, you bring
that
up
do this.
absolutely. Well, you bring up a good point too, and I think that it's something where around the time that I was had filed, you know, for divorce and order of protection with my intimate partner, it was
Mhm.
something where a friend of mine had actually said that a person that she knew through somebody else, not anybody that she was friends with, had strangled their wife, and she had filed in order of protection, police reports, the whole gamut of law enforcement involved. But they were very wealthy in the area. They had very affluent, and that's the thing is, and he controlled all the money. We'll talk about that also when we come to power and control and the different, another type of abuse, financial abuse. We'll talk about that in another episode. But Ellen's exactly right. It's not something where you just see on TV this happens. And I think there are the more probably 5 years of different episodes out there of different actual true crime when in any capacity, I think does kind of shine a light on that too, that it's not just one demographic, it's not one socioeconomic, and physical abuse can happen to anybody. And it is something that does happen, and sometimes possibly even more situations like that because of the power and control and the financial control that people have.
Right. And you know what I think broke that wide open a little bit? Just in regard to, fictional portrayals of physical violence and abuse, was the movie Sleeping with the Enemy, because he was wealthy, right? Like they were wealthy. They had a great life from the outside, right?
Yeah.
And to see that depicted as this educated man who was wealthy, and they had this huge house, and they had, does anybody remember Sleeping with the Enemy? I know I do. Um, and that was a depiction that kind of went against the other depictions that had been out there in the past, where these were some kind of like low income, ignorant people. No, 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 no. And even though it was a fictional movie, with any fiction, there is a grain of truth, and that's why it was written in the first place. So I remember that movie. And it was, I have not watched it again.
Mhm.
Um, I don't really think I want to
You
tell
know,
you the truth.
I've actually gone back and watched some of those films and like episodes that the episode of that series on Netflix made was really powerful for me to think. I was like, oh my gosh, this is my life. This is my life. And obviously not the same fashion. I'm not living in a trailer and, don't have an education or a
I'm
job.
also not living in a mansion on the
Right.
beach, but
Exactly.
yeah.
So it's all
Yeah.
that kind of shows you that any spectrum of it is something that's really, can be really triggering. And I think does say to people that are experiencing physical abuse that they start thinking of these things and even reliving things, thinking back to what they have experienced. And I think that we also just really want to emphasize too that physical abuse, and there's a scale of it and then different characteristics, but it also doesn't have to. We hope to educate people so it doesn't get to this point. So it doesn't get to the point of
Right.
having 89,000 girls are killed internationally across the globe. This is what the UN Women have put out in 2013 or 23 rather. And it
Right.
says that's for, I believe that's for domestic violence. And then the figure represents this is what the quote says on here. This figure represents the highest yearly number recorded in the past 2 decades. Data currently available for 2022 suggests that the increase in female homicides occurred despite a drop in overall number of homicides. So really, with that, it's still a topic that needs to be discussed. And that's exactly our purpose of this
What we're
podcast.
doing.
Exactly. To help educate people so it doesn't get to that point. And we really just also want to emphasize, were you gonna say something, Ellen?
I was just going to say one thing, because I was thinking about that list of the physical abuse and the abuses, right? The punching, the whatever. I'm surprised that on that list they didn't put death,
Well, I think maybe
because
I'm surprised too.
that's another one. That's another one. And also too, like, it doesn't discriminate. Okay. Like it doesn't discriminate. Um, and when people talk about physical abuse, and there's a book that we've both read, or I'm not all the way through it yet, but Why Does He Do That? By Lundy Bancroft. And Lundy Bancroft works with men in groups who have come to his group for whatever reason, maybe through an arrest, and it's part of their sentencing. But he says in there that it's a mentality, right?
Mhm.
It's an abusive mentality.
Mhm.
So he has like workshops, and he'll say to people, why do you think people, women, men, whatever, he just happens to work with men. Why do you think people physically abuse? And the answers seem to fall along the same line. They were abused as a child,
Mhm.
or they have a substance abuse problem. or they don't know how to express themselves, productively or constructively. Um, and he has shot down every one of those. He's like, it's a mentality. He's
Yeah.
like, it is not, he's like someone who has been abused as a child, because they've done studies. Someone who's been abused as a child, um, actually doesn't most times grow up to abuse because they know how it felt.
Mhm.
So they don't grow up to abuse. And then when people say, oh, well, he drinks or he's a substance abuser or whatever substance that may be. No, that just fuels it. The
Right.
mentality is already there. The substance abuse just fuels it.
Well,
It
one thing I
it's
want to do with, I think in you're saying is like just because they grew
it,
up abused, I think just because they grew up not physically abused doesn't mean that mentality, that same type of, and we'll obviously go into other types of abuse, but I think
right.
in line that you're saying too, Ellen, is just because they weren't physically abused when they were younger doesn't mean they don't transpire into being emotionally abusive,
Sure.
neglectful, verbally abusive, other coercive techniques. And I think that there's such a um, combination of type of experiences as a child to how you grow up to be, because I think that that's also an excuse, and how abusers can mask it and say, well, I was never physically abused as a child, but there's got it, or maybe I never had that in my childhood, but there's a lot of different blending, I guess you could say, that kind of could lead to
This
controlling, manipulative
behavior.
behavior. Exactly.
He does say that, again, abusers are not dumb.
No.
He does say that some abusers, okay, again, he works with men, right? So I'm just going to have to say men. He does say that some of them will say to him, oh, well, I was abused as a child.
To make
Because
up
then,
for it.
then that's their excuse. Like then they think like it justifies it.
Mhm.
And then that also kind of bleeds into the narcissistic victim mentality, which is very dangerous, where they think that, yes, I did do this, I did, they admit to it or they've been arrested for it or whatever, but they have all of their reasons as to why.
Yeah.
And
Just
that, and they justify it. And so they say, well, this is what happened to me and this is why I do this. And Lundy Bancroft um ain't buying that. Right? Like I mean, this is what this guy does. So the book is really interesting. If anybody out there wants to read it,
Mhm.
has the ability to read it, it is Why Does He Do That? And it's not necessarily super recent. I think it's
the
like it's from like 10 years ago,
that just early.
maybe.
I think so too.
Yeah.
Really, it was recommended to me too. Um,
Mhm.
when I was
It's
in
like
the
a
mid.
Bible. I mean, seriously, it's like a Bible. It's riveting. Like,
Right.
I mean, when he really gets into it, it's riveting. And so if anybody wants to pick that book up, now we fully acknowledge that you and your personal situation may not have the ability to have that book on your nightstand out in the open. So
Downloaded.
if you, right, I mean, we had a conversation with someone that we won't disclose who she has to listen to it as an audiobook, but on her work computer because her current husband does not have access to that computer and won't touch that computer because he knows it's her work computer, which is also her livelihood, which also benefits him. So he's not going to screw with that.
Because
But
he did
that's
it
how
on
she,
his phone. That's what we will
well, but,
mention. Personal,
because he went through her phone, right? Yeah,
or not emotional.
um,
Yeah.
we'll get to that. I mean, we haven't even gotten so physical again, um, overt, right?
Mhm.
Like your story, wear long sleeves, wear long pants. A lot of times the physical abusers won't um touch the person's face because that's
Right.
way too obvious.
I do the
Um,
face. I was
way
always
too
like very
obvious.
close to it, but never touched my like. They're slapping and hitting, that kind of thing in the face is like very much because then people will see it, and then you've got it. People will start asking questions, and so it's very like you said, they're smart, you know,
They're
these people.
smart. They're smart. And
Mhm.
I remember, and this just came to me right now. This was probably 1996. So I wasn't married yet. So this is not about me. This is about a lady that I worked with, and I was good friends with her, and she was engaged, and I was actually invited to her wedding. It was a blast, by the way. Um, and she came into work one day, and she had long hair. She had long, beautiful hair. Oh, the prettiest color. And she would part in the middle and just let it, like, flow down. Came to work one day, and she literally had like this like swoop of hair that completely covered like one side of her face.
She got hit in the face.
And it was a different look for her. So of course, and we were all pretty tight back then. Like we had a really great department. And one of the ladies said, why, why are you wearing your hair like that? Um, and she was just like, oh, just, it's no big deal. It's no big deal. And mind you, this wedding was like weeks away, right?
Oh, before.
And oh yeah, it was like 3 weeks before our wedding.
Oh no.
And so, but then at some point in the day, she did like, pull it away from her face, probably because she was just sick of it being there. But she did pull it away from her face, and the same lady saw it.
Hmm.
And I mean, and we are like in a department of, I don't know, 15 people, all women.
Hmm.
And this lady, you could hear her. She said, "What in the hell happened to your face? What
Hmm.
happened to your face? Like, did he hit you? Like, what is going on?" And the woman got mad at the lady who asked. It's none of
Hmm.
your business. It's none of your business. I don't need to tell you anything. Yeah, and like stormed out of the office. And we were all like, that's not good. Because we all knew exactly what it was. I mean, it was her whole, clearly he had punched her in the eye, right? And it was her whole like under here and like above here. And like a new punch, it's like purple, right? Um, and and she came back in. She did come back in, and she had settled down, and she was like, I appreciate your concern. She's like, but I just can't talk about this. I can't
Hmm.
talk about it.
Yeah.
And the woman who had questioned her was like, you're marrying him. Like you're marrying him in 3 weeks. How, how
Hmm.
can she was like, I just
Yeah.
leave it alone, right? Leave it alone.
Did she end up burying him?
And yes, she did.
Jeez.
I was there.
Oh, that's right. That is the wedding. You know, and I think that that's
I was
something
there.
I want to make sure we talk about too in like a future episodes and not trying to leave you all hanging in so many like things about next episode. But we really do want to dive into all these topics. But that is a perfect example too that Ellen and I will go into as well as like that. Not I wouldn't say denial because that's not an accurate depiction of it. It's just like that
Yeah.
that fear. I think it's a fear, you know, for breaking it all open, essentially, no pun intended, you know, of literally
No.
saying, you
Yeah.
know, I just can like there's so many different we actually have a call um I was gonna say college. We have a friend who I know I do that has experienced this and somebody who I do know from, you know, when I was younger that has the experience of that if I didn't know, you know, for a lot of years, somebody that I knew growing up that I was like, oh my gosh, I had no idea you experienced this. And I think that it's something too where I'm
Don't
sure
say anything.
somebody that has gone through this that they don't say anything like well you're a friend at your office, you know, and I think that you can even I think once you're aware of what these situations are of different types of abuse you're not going to go analyze all your friends but you can look back and think oh my gosh something's
Whoa,
not you know something's not
something's not
right
right.
and I think that that's exactly what happened to me when I was being you know physically abused and all the other different types that I experienced it was something where people were like oh that makes so much sense. That clicks. That
It is so interesting that you say that because I remember, and I will tell this story as well. Um, I was nervous about telling my mother that I was divorcing um my ex-husband because number one, like my dad was already gone and had been for a couple of years. And I just didn't want to disappoint her. I didn't want to hurt her. I didn't want to. And I remember telling her at my son's basketball game. She had
Mhm.
come to watch my son play basketball, and I just like blurted it out. I was like,
You're like, I gotta tell her.
I told her I told my ex-husband I want a divorce. And she looked at me and she was just like, okay.
She knew.
And I was like,
She
what?
knew.
I'm like, that's it. That's it. Um, and I don't care that I slipped because people have names. Okay. And I looked at her and I was like, Mom, you know, and I'll tell you what, my mom and I, we have like, we bicker and we do whatever. And we have for years. She was a mother of three girls, that couldn't have been easy. But she showed up. She showed up.
I'm
I
glad.
mean, like, and it to this day, it makes me like, because I was expecting, Ellen, no, 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 you've got to like stay in. And she didn't. And she told me stuff that I never knew about how her and my dad felt about him. And they just didn't want to say anything and they didn't know what to say. And that is so like hard to hear and I said to her, I'm like, why didn't you say anything? She goes, you wouldn't have listened to me.
So many people in my
She's
life
like,
that
you
said that.
wouldn't have listened to me. And I was like, you're right. You're right. I wouldn't have. I would have been like, stop, that's my husband, like, because I was caught a lot of the times in between
Mhm.
um, arguments that he had with other people in my family, in his family, friends.
Communication at its finest.
And I'm the referee. I'm the negotiator. I'm the one that both sides come to me, but they don't talk to each other. And I never knew. I never knew. And, you know, I like wish my dad could have seen me
Mhm.
divorce him.
Right.
What an odd thing to say. Um, I wish he could have seen it.
Well, and I think so, like, I think it's also like another reason we wanted to put out this podcast too, is like, so many people aren't in that situation. You know what I mean? So if
Yeah.
people aren't, 10 years down the road, aren't in that situation where, and like we had said on our first episode too, of like, people that are supporting people that are
Yeah.
experiencing
Yeah.
domestic violence and domestic assault and abuse. And it's something too where it happens to be so much hindsight, if you will,
Mm,
from not only from the people that are the
all it
victims,
is.
not only for the victims and survivors of domestic violence, but also for the people around them that love them. I have so many people that told me that after I got divorced too, and they said, gosh, I
They're
saw
like,
very
thank God, right?
some controlling behaviors that with that person, and they were like, oh my gosh, we didn't know what to say.
Hmm.
You baby wouldn't have listened. And well, I definitely want to go into that next time or in future episodes too, of just like why the mentality of the person experiencing
Abused.
of being abused, of why you are either gaslighted into think that it doesn't actually isn't happening, or told like that it isn't happening, and then maybe you're just imagining things, or your
It's your
loved one,
fault.
or like
It's your fault,
or your loved one
right?
so much that it's something too where the wool, I always like to say the wool was over my eyes in that capacity. But I think there's a lot of different, it's layered, like we talked about last time, that there's so many layers that are involved in it. And it's really just unfortunate across the board for anybody that's experienced this. But it is something too where we hope to also empower people to have the courage and the awareness and the education. That's really what we kind of wanted to make sure we emphasize each episode.
Yeah.
And just let
Mm.
people know as we're kind of wrapping up here too, is like we will continue to go back into all of these different types. We'll explain all the different types of abuse, and then provide our own examples of obviously whatever we're comfortable with and censoring, because we'll share our stories because this happened to us.
Right.
And it's something where we just want to remind you like that we are here to provide resources as we evolve with our podcast too. We will have an area where you can give us feedback, comments, etc., and have it be something too where we do want to hear from people as to what are you experiencing, because there's a lot more information that we have to share with you all.
Right. And to add to that, and this is a good place, to segue into ending, is that A lot of times people don't say anything, um, because they've been convinced it's their fault. And so they think if they say something to a loved one or a friend that they're going to get that same reaction, well, what did you do? Right?
Mhm.
What did you do to bring
People
this
put it
on?
me- people blame me
Takes
for
two to tango, stuff
Mhm.
like that. But you're already partially convinced it's your fault just because the person's been working on you for so long.
Mhm.
Um, like my sister, and I always reference my sister, and I'll continue to reference my sister, my oldest sister. I have two. Don't worry, other sister. I'll reference you at some point too. But she said, he installed buttons in you, right? Like I said, methodically,
Mhm.
deliberately installed buttons in you, and knew how to push them. And it's up for you, up to you to uninstall them,
Yeah.
right?
Not
And
that
to
example.
get that voice out of your head.
Mhm.
So yeah, so that is a way we like to end, is that it's not your fault, right? And you do matter.
Mhm.
And the only person that you should be listening to is yourself.
Mhm.
Um, and that you can create, your own truth, and you can create your own life. And you do only have one life.
Mhm.
And again, how do you want to live it? Right? You matter. And like I said the last time, if you don't believe it now, we're going to keep telling you over and over and over again, until you understand. I mean, I'm not saying that our viewers or our listeners are not, intelligent enough, but like until you understand it, because I know what it's like to have been worked on for so long that even when somebody objectively who's outside your life looking in is saying to you, oh my gosh, you don't deserve this. You're worth more than this. You deserve better than this. You don't believe it. You don't believe it. Like you literally think that you are shit. And that's because you have been told that you are. Okay.
Mhm.
Um, before I really get on my soapbox, um, I wanted to also too, again, with our housekeeping, if all goes well, okay, when it comes to me, there's a 50% chance that there's somehow going to be a screw up. There will be a slide for like the video part of this at the end that has our email. Okay. So then you can contact us.
Mhm.
If you are listening, and this is the second time you're listening, totally got our YouTube channel wrong last week, by the way. It's actually at Living Out Loud dash FE5YC. So screwed that
What?
one up last week.
That's all right. And
Hmm?
once you subscribe, it'll just be there already for you. So
Right,
no worries.
exactly. So, and I also wanted to give credit to Mike Cohen, who we had a personnel change on my end. We had a personnel change. So Mike Cohen actually created our title slide and our ending slide for the video portion, adding Levi's music to it. And Levi is
Levi Britton is an amazing musician, and he is our intro and outro musician with his song Who You Are, and really, really talented. So go ahead and check him out at LeviBritton.com. And you can get a list of his shows and everything will be on there for some great listening. And we thank you, Levi, for allowing us to use your wonderful song. And because we do want to remind people that, discovering who you are is so important. And
a
another
great song. Yeah.
it is
It's a
great.
great message. It's a great message. I
Mhm.
mean, and it applies again to anybody. And also too, we want to mention our good friend Keani and her podcast. We have some friends in the podcast world, believe it or not. So Keani Hollingsworth. And am I saying Keani right? I
That's
totally
yeah.
want to I want to
Okay.
like call her
Well,
Kiki. I call you Kiki.
sure.
And
Yeah.
hers is called, what is, I have it written down in my,
That's okay. Kiani Hollingsworth is becoming my best me, and she puts
okay,
out weekly, and sometimes twice a month kind of episodes that are just so amazing. So she has been integral in helping us kind of set this up as
right.
coaching us in that capacity, but just such a motivator and
Oh, she's
positive
great.
person. you really
It's
want to
great.
give credit to. And we just and wrapping up and everything with that, like Ellen was saying too, we have one more person we want to kind of mention, the Crime Dog podcast. Is that correct, Ellen? Your
Oh
friend?
my gosh, that's right. Yeah, the Crime Dog podcast, and dog is spelled oh so creatively, DAWG. That's another person we know in the podcast sphere, and that is a podcast that is a weekly podcast. You can find it on YouTube, and it is actually three guys, two retired law enforcement, one still active, and they weekly tackle issues within the law enforcement environment. So I wanted to also mention them because they're doing some good work. Right. Kiki is doing some good work. I'm sorry, that's what I'm calling you from now on. I'm calling you Kiki. I think it's adorable. And she's doing a great job. And she left us the most lovely video or audio like text because she said it was too much to write. And she sent us this like 5 minute long like message that was so I just love the way she expresses herself. And hopefully we can have her on.
Yes,
I
I think
want to
that
have her on.
yeah, that's something else we'll have on our future episodes too, is we'll have guest speakers and have people that are professionals, survivors, and just really there's a lot more to come. We want to thank you for listening and thank you for the time that you've spent. And we hope we gave you a little bit of information wherever you are wherever you're listening, but then also in any way that you're wanting to be involved to support others that are experiencing this. And there will be next episode will be out soon. So keep coming back, but we just want to thank you. And as Ellen was saying, that you matter, you are important. This is your story and you are worth it. You just remember that you're worth it and you matter. So thank you for joining us.
That's right. Your life is waiting for you. All you got to do is go get it. Thank you, Dee Dee. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, Ellen. Thank you, everybody.